Hey, welcome to Crip Campus.
Crip Campus episode 8.
Is that right? I think it's 7.
7?
Keep this in. So I'm Cindy Nover. Who are you? Oh, see, I have actually did a spit take here.
I'm Ryan Parrey.
Okay. Yeah. And you were just asking me what?
Yeah. So Cindy, you've written a new paper.
I have.
I generally don't know what it's about, but I'd like to.
Okay. Yeah, so this is in press now in the Journal of Post-Secondary Education and Disability, or JPED, as I think they call themselves, which I now think there's an S missing. No, post-secondary is one word. Anyway, this is published by AHED, the Association on Higher Ed and Disability. Do you know about those folks?
Very much.
Yeah, so it's sort of a journal about post-secondary education and disability. And I started writing this. So it's in press now. They accept your publication, and then they tell you later when they're going to actually make it. Maybe could be today. I don't know. Yeah. And so this paper is about a project that I did a few years ago where we did a few things. We created a Canvas course here at our institution for faculty who wanted to take the Canvas course about accessibility. And at that time, we knew that Title II, which is a Department of Justice law, was going to make it so that all universities had to meet digital accessibility standards within the next couple of years. And so we knew that was on the horizon right now in 2026. And it's all anyone can talk about.
It's all going into effect in April.
Correct. Yeah, this April. And so at the time, it was kind of like, what if we have faculty learn about digital accessibility? I and my colleague went to the Texas Distance Learning Academy. I have the name for that, actually. A Texas Digital Learning Association, which teaches you about how to make materials accessible. And we created a Canvas course for faculty. And I'll tell you more about that course. But then I interviewed faculty who participated in the course 1 year after they took the course to find out if they had implemented any of the things that they learned. And what were the barriers, or how did it go, basically, right?
Yeah.
And so in some of my research, my lit review for the paper, I learned, take out that O. I'm not going to do any more of those. In the lit review for the paper, I learned that there are some common types of disabilities that are disclosed by college students. Ryan, can you guess what some of the top disabilities are reported by college students to receive accommodations? And then what are the most popular accommodations? Do you have any guesses?
ADHD, test anxiety is my guesses for the reported things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the accommodations are probably no test or work time, due date extensions, and test taking extra time modifications.
Good guesses. So the number one, this was as of 2024, the number one most common type of disability disclosed by college students is ADHD. 84% of, good. I should have said guess the percent according to this 2024 document that I have. Psychiatric and disabilities related to mental and emotional health was the second most popular or common, and then specific learning disabilities was the third most common.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And so then obviously the accommodations that folks requested were test taking, like you said, alternate formats for books or other materials, online format options, and then assistive technology. And so
according, well, if it's a distance, but
yeah. So are those types of disorders and accommodations related to Title II?
Yes.
Because, well, I mean, you have a visual impairment, which is not one of the things on this list, right? And some folks have, mobility impairments, and that is not some of the most common things that people are reporting needing accommodations for. And so it seems like these are specifically about what goes on in the classroom, right? Or on the course, right? On Canvas, et cetera, or most of these.
Which seems super appropriate for Title II, because they say, I would imagine that they're assuming, or somebody's making an assumption somewhere, right, that, well, the campus, or at the very least the classroom physically, is accessible, even if it's not. But these things actually, these particular impairment categories touch on, I can't say else, learning environments more explicitly, right? Whether it's in person or digitally, or distance learning. So, yeah, I think you would want to, whoever you report a disability to, if it's this related, you would want to report it for accommodation. So, people, I remember a few years ago, somebody saying, oh, all the data shows that there's a rise in education-related impairments. Is that true, or is that there's more planets now that we have telescopes? Is it that these situations were always there, now that we are being told to care about them just in this particular way?
Right.
And that's why we're getting reports of them.
Right.
Say more about what you found.
Certainly, when we're thinking, okay, it makes sense that if people are trying to learn things in classes at a university, then they're going to name the things that might interfere with their learning or their classroom participation. And so that's what I see here in this list. I wonder if when faculty or other people, quote, think that they don't have any students with disabilities in their class and therefore maybe are a little bit resistant to like universal design kind of techniques and things, is it because they think disability is something other than what's on this list? Or does the man on the street think that disability is something you can see, and therefore if they look out at their sea of students and they don't see any of that, then they're kind of like, well, I don't need to do this Title II stuff. My students aren't disabled. What do you think?
Yeah, I think your average person, and probably honestly your average professor, instructor, think, well, a disabled student is somebody with a very visible situation, and anyone else is, pick your euphemism, that being too sensitive, trying to get away with something in that area.
Yeah.
You can't hear this, but rolling your eyes. Come on. Oh, geez. Oh, everyone's disabled nowadays. And in saying / thinking that, simply reproducing and extending and strengthening that ableist or disablist mindset. In education, in your training, obviously people went there by choice, I'm assuming?
Yes, no one was forced to go there, right?
So did you encounter a lot of did you notice a lot of resistance to this training, or?
No, the training was specifically about digital learning, right? And so we didn't have to discuss who's disabled and who isn't. It was just like who can consume these materials and who can't, and then imply your diagnosis or whatever from there. But I've thought, and I'll talk about this with the results here, that some faculty think that they don't have students with disabilities and therefore universal design is just kind of a suggestion. And certainly now that we're working with faculty about Title II stuff, we have whole groups of faculty that they're not trying to help the disabled students or meet Title II expectations. They just sometimes don't understand why it's so important.
I think between today and our last recording, I came up with a slogan or a motto that I've been using in class.
Okay.
And I will now say what it is. For all I know, I heard this somewhere. I've just been saying it. But disability is how, not who. Or disablement is how, not who, right? We're not trying to spot the disabled student. We're looking, how does the pedagogy inherently or explicitly or implicitly, right, generate barriers for learning? And that's never a who.
Right.
It's always a how, right? Because you don't have to, that's why it's universal design or universal design for learning, right? The focus isn't on, I see you, Cindy, I'm gonna do this for you. It's thinking ahead, planning ahead, designing ahead, right? And so, yeah, I would imagine that this program you went through was a lot of not just tips and tricks, but like more serious design principles and practices.
Yeah,
right.
And they talked about the laws and by the way, this paper is called Doing the, in quotes, extra work end quote, faculty training and universal design accessibility. And I'll talk about that idea that this is somehow like extra to what we're supposed to be doing. Versus,
I wish we'd been working together more back then. I want to write this paper with you.
Well, maybe we could do like a part 2 or something, because I had to interview some people and they gave me money to do that. And so I couldn't have shared that with you. So
it's still doing the extra work.
Yeah, exactly. You would have been doing the extra work. I was compensated for my exactly.
Well, I mean, that's a great point, right? A lot of faculty, I would presume, think the extra work is this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And would you say, well, I thought of a reading from my class to read and I got it to them? Is that extra?
Is that extra? Is that like part of what you're supposed to be doing here?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a good question. So I learned, and this is not new information here, I'm sure, but when we try to offload some faculty responsibilities for accessibility onto student services offices, like a disability rights office or some different institutions have different names for it. It is quite understaffed in most of those offices. The ranges that I saw were between 94 students to one person to 160 students to one person. So it's really inappropriate to think that we could just send everybody over to our student support office and then they could have their needs met, right? So we've already established why it's important to do universal design, but that's sort of the background of this paper. And then, like I said, we had the faculty go through this Canvas course, and the Canvas course had 3 sections. One was about disability law and the requirements for that. One was about accessible course materials, and then the third one was about universal design. So the second one was like the tips and tricks about how to make your stuff accessible. And then universal design was just thinking about universal design concepts related to that. And then also some tips and tricks about how to, design things universally.
I mean, and just to be fair, when we say tips and tricks, what we mean is robust, data-driven, outcome-oriented, or
like a business guy.
I know. It's not just tips. I don't want to minimize.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And we've been doing a lot. I'm sure anyone who's listening right now in a university setting knows that the adherence to Title II that everyone is going through right now involves way more than just showing up to one session and having somebody give you a tip about something, because we're talking about optical character recognition. We're talking about like taking your documents and uploading them into a different format and then checking that and then putting them back in the original format and all this stuff. So that goes way beyond a tip. It involves training. And so in my literature review, I talked about the problem that we were trying to address with this being that there was at the time that I was conducting this, which was in 2024-ish, there were very few universities that had mandatory accessibility training for faculty. I was able to name some of them in the paper where it was obligatory, and most others had that as an option. Some universities didn't even have it as an option.
There were so few that you could name it in a paragraph.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So I was arguing that the mandatory training could help people overall just stay abreast of the law, but also the literature suggests that faculty who did participate in training experienced there was a positive campus climate and improvement in campus climate toward people with disabilities, improvement in academic outcomes for disabled students, and a positive influence on faculty attitudes toward disability. So there was our project here was much smaller, but there was a similar training at an institution that had 350 faculty, staff, and administrators who participated in this training. And then faculty became more engaged with the issue. So they were requesting disability syllabus statements. They were attending evening training sessions, like voluntary evening sessions. And then there was a university website that really reported all what they had done, and it was a place that you could visit and really learn more about accessibility on that campus. And so we thought, well, we could improve faculty attitudes toward these things in our campus climate, but our group of participants was optional, and 30 faculty participated in our program, which was in June some year.
That's a lot.
Yeah, and some of them are still talking to me now about, oh yeah, if I hadn't learned that then, I wouldn't be in the group of people right now that's panicking about Title II. So that's good. So after participants taught for a year, I interviewed them. Mm-hmm. Not all of them, but some of them. And we asked them about their confidence after the course, immediately after the course, pre and post. How confident do you feel making accessible materials? And their confidence improved, and their overall knowledge of how to make materials accessible improved. And then I sat down with them and asked them in about hour-long interviews what they did to, or whether they did anything, right? So some of the questions involve like, how did you implement these things, or did you implement these things, and then what was that like? So for example, what were your experiences with incorporating digital accessibility concepts into your course materials was one question. And then what were barriers to incorporating digitally accessible content in course materials?
Okay.
Do you have any guesses about what people were able to implement sort of successfully after learning these concepts, and what some of the barriers might have been?
Yeah. I'm projecting, but I bet one of the big barriers was still the not trivial amount of work it can take to produce accessible documents, Word documents, or else. Negotiating and managing conflicting access needs. I don't know if that's specific enough, but I know if you do it seriously, it's a real thing. Maybe doing the work versus, oh yeah, this is, again, I'm absolutely projecting. Doing the work, implementing the practices and processes, and big long pause, and what's the word? And reconciling that work with the inbuilt Access Ally software programming that evaluates if and how well you've done the work is a guess.
I don't think anyone mentioned our accessibility checker ally in what they reported, but they did in terms of what they were able to glean or learn from the program, from the Canvas course. The things that they were able to do involved checking accessibility in digital platforms, though not necessarily an ally, although they did learn how to do that. That was one of the assignments, such as like Microsoft Office. They could use the accessibility checkers. Where exactly. And it is also in Microsoft products, but you just have to sort of know what you're doing. And so, yeah, they said that they started checking those things regardless of whether they had a student with a disability, which was the point, right? Yeah, exactly. And they said that they adjusted like the spacing and layout of their text. They changed the font style, started using headers, used grayscale instead of colors if they were trying to signify meaning in something. They learned how to and then do OCR, optical character recognition compatibility. They modified their PDFs. Some of them, like I had one person who had a student or more than one student with low vision, and so they read the content aloud and downloaded and posted audio files of PowerPoints and other documents just so that there was this verbal. I mean, many programs have that built in that you can create an audio track, but the faculty were like checking those and making sure that they sounded appropriate.
Oh, that's good. I would think similarly visual descriptors.
Yeah, they provided
alt text, whatever.
Yeah, verbal or alt text descriptions of images. They paid closer attention to the quality of their videos by reviewing captions or adding them, providing transcripts. Some of them re-recorded videos that were inaccessible. They spoke more slowly, and one person mentioned, I think she took this out of her own pocket, invested in recording equipment that was better than what we had. I mentioned that we have a recording studio here, but she doesn't live around here. And if you're not people in this room, then you know that our campus is a little bit far away from like the city where a lot of people live.
Everything else.
Right. Yeah. Well, I happen to live in the city, so yeah.
That's true.
But yes, so that was something that those were some things that the faculty did. And then in terms of universal design, they provided various formats for materials for learning. They accepted different assignment types for submission, right? So we know with universal design that we're talking about multiple means of representation of the material and then multiple means of accepting what the students have learned, right? So they can do a skit. Yeah, exactly, right? So faculty talked about giving options to students, like working individually or in groups. They made sure to open their Canvas courses with all of the content in advance, as well as like lecture notes and handouts in advance. They changed how they graded. Sometimes they accepted quote unquote late work with minimal penalty, or they just didn't call it late. And then they had students submit drafts or portions. And they even gave examples of what a B grade would look like.
Doing that.
Yeah.
That's useful, I think.
Yeah, this faculty, I said, so did you also give an A grade? And they said, no, I just gave an example of what a B grade looked like. And so they
Anything better
above, or below that, right?
I give a, what do? I give a good, mediocre, and bad example.
Okay.
And then we go over it, and I say, and this is why this is mediocre. And in case it's not clear, this is why this is bad.
Who wrote those?
I made them up.
Okay. Did you use AI? No, this was probably before.
It was not. It was not.
Okay. And so did you write them yourself, or did AI?
I AI'd them, and then I went in and tweaked it.
Yeah.
But I also said I wanted to create these examples and then indicate why. And I did go in, and what I did do is I went in and I gave my feedback that I would actually give.
Okay.
And so at least I did that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't think it's bad. I mean, the alternative is that you have to get permission from the student to share this.
And I run that fast. And I've run that. You know what? I have sample assignment X, sample assignment Y. And that's always previous student material, disidentified. But for these things, I can't remember exactly which. They weren't the main assignments.
Mm-hmm.
I think they might have been the equivalent of a discussion post.
Mm-hmm.
And like, this is a bad discussion post. This is a good discussion post. This is in between.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway.
Is there any reason that they weren't the main assignments?
I think, this would have been in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
I didn't want to leave it up to AI.
Yeah.
I thought seeing a real student work with real me feedback would be stronger.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
So I just covered some of the things that the faculty did and seemed to be proud to do that were positive.
And a year later, post-test, that's significant.
Yeah. And now we'll get on to the barriers to implementation. The one main barrier was their perceived lack of knowledge on the topic. I can let the cat out of the bag and say the main barrier was time, as you already guessed.
Mm-hmm.
But perceived lack of knowledge was a barrier to implementation. And when we think about why students sometimes cheat, it's because they just didn't have the self-confidence in thinking that they could follow the instructor's expectations. So they just tried to get that from someone else or AI or whatever, right? And so it's kind of interesting that same thing showed up here with faculty. And I didn't sort of pin them down and say, but I taught you this stuff. How did you have a lack of knowledge? Because it wasn't the lack of knowledge, it was the perceived lesson. Mm-hmm. So in someone's defense, the course was in June, and I thought that they would use the learnings from the course over the summer to think about how they might learn in their fall class. And I think some of them did, but some of them said, oh, I just forgot about it over the summer because then I went on break. And so even though you showed me how to do X, Y, Z, I didn't think that I knew how to do that by the time my next, quarter rolled around, right? Some faculty said they didn't like auto captioning, and so they just sort of didn't check. It was like they didn't want to do captions when they couldn't use auto captions. It's just like they didn't feel like going in and correcting them, I think. And so then they just sort of gave up on the idea of doing captioning.
And auto captions are inaccurate.
Correct. Mm-hmm. And then some said they couldn't find online videos with captions. So also they just sort of gave up on that. They tried to find things. And so I think things have changed a little bit now in terms of how much things are captioned. But at that time, what
you're doing is giving up on the students who need that to access the material.
You're preaching to the choir here, bro.
It's almost as if.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Mm-hmm. They said that one faculty member, or actually two, I think, said that materials are more boring when they're accessible, perhaps because you can't just put a picture of a cat that's just not relevant to the content without having to maybe do an alt text description that says cat that's not relevant to the content.
Relevant.
Which is one of the Title II expectations, that if you're putting an image there that doesn't relate to the content, then you can say in the alt text, like unrelated to the content, just a funny image or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I think some faculty kind of liked to put those things on there. And then when they had to like explain it,
make it serious.
Yeah, exactly. Because everyone else who didn't have a visual impairment was looking up there at the cat and enjoying that. And then the person with a visual impairment reads funny picture of a cat and kind of like, yeah, exactly. Okay, just have like imagine what's funny about this cat, right? Or one faculty member who had a lot of physical materials would have students normally like get up, move around the room, and go to different stations that had these different things and do that. Well, right. And so, but this faculty member perceived that to be a barrier in whatever way, either a physical barrier, getting up and moving around, or something like that. Maybe if somebody is a little bit slower at sort of reading some of that, then when you're having everybody sort of quickly go around it to different stations, that can be more difficult for more than one student. And so then she was just kind of like, well, so I just didn't do those active learning strategies anymore.
Yeah, that's a shame, because I don't think even basic principles and practices of universal design or accessibility, they're not meant to disallow active learning.
Right.
Far from it. I don't know what that would look like.
Right.
But give it a shot.
And I think that's the sort of baby steps that we start with, right? Somebody saying, I want to make the exact course that I've been delivering for the last 15 years into a more universally designed course, but I haven't thought my way from the strategies I was using in class to the end goal. And so now it's just hard. And so I'll just cancel that activity, right? But eventually, if you had enough time, and again, time was the biggest barrier reported, you could sit back and say, okay, what's the, let's say, digital equivalent of these stations that people go around to, if that was your concern, something about the physical cards or the physically moving around, right? That's not too hard. But if you're under the gun, if you're under pressure, as many of our faculty are right now, for like spring quarter, then they might just say, well, that's not worth it. And I've done it too. I'm sure you have too. Like there's something coming up that sure was going to be fun. And if someone was like evaluating my teaching on that day beyond the students, like I might make sure to do these kind of fun, active learning things. But right now I'm just tired and I don't feel like doing the fun thing. So we're going to cancel that.
Yeah, sure.
So it's understandable, especially if you're not grounded in the idea that this is important. I'm not saying these people, they obviously elected to participate in the course, but if you're thinking, okay, maybe this is just being handed down from above somewhere and I don't have time, I have all this other work, it can be a little bit difficult, right? So again, faculty need training, hopefully mandatory training on how to still do active learning, for example, in the world of people with disabilities or universal design, right?
Mm-hmm. Again, it'll make it'll make those activities even better. They're good. If don't you want them to be even better? But no. So okay, I've got a follow up at the end about how do we support the need for these things among faculty. I don't want to step on your toes.
No, I had that same question for you in the margin, which is if faculty currently think, or at least as of the time that I conducted these interviews, although this phrase extra work, I use it intentionally in the title and I've heard it a million times. And so how can we help faculty think of this as not extra work? And you brought it up sort of like, okay, so is getting this document and then giving it to your students, like reading a book and then talking to your students about that, is that extra work or is that just part of your job, right? So we're at a place, I mean, not just now, we've been in this place for a long time, where this kind of innovation is perceived as extra work. But like grading papers, I mean, I read books in the evening, which is theoretically like my free time, about something that I plan to teach, right? And so I could say, Ryan is shaking his head like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that, right? Look at the union rep in here, right? But I mean, so but I'm not sitting there thinking, oh, look, I'm really wasting my time because I want to digest that overnight or over the next few weeks and then introduce it in my spring class. So what are the things that faculty think are their job right now? And why is this extra work? I don't know if that's a question, but it is. I mean, it's kind of a question, right? Like, what are faculty jobs and what is extra?
Yeah.
Good. I mean, I read the job description of professors recently when I was trying to learn whether using AI to grade your papers and provide student feedback is against any rules. And it is not. That is not written down anywhere. And yet, exactly. And so when I read what faculty are supposed to do, the things on the list of our like job description include holding classes interfacing with students, like in office hours and things like that, grading papers, although that wasn't specifically listed. It was like leading classes and et al., whatever would go into like leading a class, and then mentoring, interfacing with students in ways that will help them graduate. Basically, like that's our job.
Okay, great.
So within that, I guess, should be, for example, if I just gave my students a book in Spanish and said, like, here's a book about social work.
Read it.
Yeah. Then everyone would know that I'm not doing my job according to what was expected of me. But nobody told me ever here that I have to use English. Nobody told me ever here that I can't just give somebody something that's written by Proust or somebody that's like way too hard to read.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing. I would say you'd be doing your job. You wouldn't be doing your job well.
Okay.
If you're right. Or as well as you could be like with the case of the book. Come on, Cindy. Most of your class doesn't know Spanish. You have to at least explain it to them in English. That's making the work accessible.
So what if we thought of it, instead of work and extra work, we thought of it as being a good teacher and being a bad teacher? Would that be more inspiring?
And if you get the positive label, right? Sure. I don't know. Right? Isn't it exactly that? I mean, I get paid whatever to work so many hours a day or a week or a month or a year or what have you, but we work way more than that. You know, I don't know about you. It's not like, oh, perfect. It's not like that show Severance, where if you've seen it, they literally go into work on an elevator and come out on that elevator, and their brain literally cuts off, and there's work brain and there's not work brain, and they literally don't remember each other.
Right. There's a suspended state of like work state, which I think we think is more beneficial for the work environment. That happens in Brave New World too, which I just said last week, where it's like we have to have like a separate mind. So they say when you're working, then you're like an adult. In this book, Brave New World, when you're working, you're like an adult and you're doing adult things. Every time you're off work, you're supposed to be like a baby, an infant, very dependent on things because the state can then control that, whatever, right? So like, but yeah, so
okay, that makes sense. I haven't read that since high school, but
so it's fresh in my brain. But yeah, exactly. So work consists of something, and that's different than free time.
And I think that's exactly it. And what makes it extra work is I can't just hand it to you and say, look at this. I have to do I get this from art, this word. And there's a non-trivial amount of work in the delivery mechanisms.
So is it, I can read this, I can do this, and so if you can't,
then
it's extra.
To make it so that you can must be extra.
And I'm comparing you to my own way of interpreting the world. So
my own way, or the standard,
right?
The quote unquote, all in quotes, the standard or the assumed norm. I mean, we've just described normalcy in education. Yeah, I think that I bet deep down. That's exactly what it is.
Do disabled instructors, please speak on behalf of all disabled
instructors.
I would.
Here you go.
Do disabled instructors think of this as extra work?
I know I do sometimes. I still do it.
I just put on my big guy pants and go out and do my job.
Yeah. I mean, there are times when I'm just like, I really don't want to do this, but here goes. Well, quite honestly, with the Title II process that we're doing here at our school, I got like the first draft of here's how you review your materials, and I started going through, it's like a many step process, and I went through it, and then I hit a roadblock, and I emailed and I said, oh geez, okay. So then I emailed the person that I thought I was supposed to email about it a few weeks ago, not putting anybody on the spot, but and I said, I've gotten to step 13 and I hit this roadblock. So that's where I'm at. And then because I have experience with Access LL and Canvas, I said, hey, by the way, at least in my experience, conducting the Access Ally monitoring report is easy. You do just click a button or two, but actually acting on the report is incredibly difficult. It's inaccessible to me most of the time. And so I'm happy to do the work of implementing the changes, but there is a barrier. The barrier is the format of the report. And I still haven't heard back, but that's okay. But so I absolutely, just like a bunch of other people, I was there last week or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, and I'm just like, oh, geez, I'm going to do this. And at first I was focused on the extra part. Now I'm focused on the work part. If it was effortless, is it work? I mean, so it's like, I don't go to the gym and I don't know, move a easy to move around clipboard.
Right.
And I said I've worked out.
Right.
Right. But okay, you don't want to, I'm not going to go down that route. But yeah, I don't know. If we're going to talk about extra work, then what is work? Is it only what's spelled out?
And what's easy.
Right. Or is it, when I teach something, I don't say it one way and move on.
Right.
I say it two ways. Is that extra? No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I think if people with disabilities were less marginalized in our society, it would be easier to get on board with some of these things too. So I'm not blaming the specific instructors, but if somebody announced that we're doing DEI stuff now, sorry to say entry loads in 2026, but if somebody's like, we're all suffering now. If somebody says, well, we found out that students of color are graduating at a lower rate because of some specific content that faculty are delivering, so we need to get rid of that content so that we can improve graduation rates for these people, I feel like many faculty would be like, oh, that sounds terrible. I don't want some students to not be doing well and some students to be doing well by virtue of their identity category, right? But this is an identity category that students occupy, that sometimes results in lower graduation rates, et cetera. And perhaps just like you talk about ableism or disableism as atmosphere, it's just the water we swim in, right? Like I wouldn't know. I mean, of course, students with disabilities are going to graduate at lower rates. They're disabled.
Right.
Is like a tidy explanation for all this, right?
And that's a good example of a thing that people might say, we're not saying it. Just to
yeah, one could say that.
That soundbite following you ever.
Right. Yeah, exactly. We'll just cut that out in post-production. But no, I think so I think the ableism overshadows all of this stuff, right?
Yeah. I mean, it certainly can, and I think does. It's what makes it extra work, and makes extra seem untenable, overwhelmingly extra.
Yeah, and then some faculty in my study reported that some of the negative things that they said students said, because I asked, we didn't collect student feedback as part of the study, but I asked just anecdotally, did you see anything? Did students like the new improvements that you made or changes, right? And so some faculty said that the students said they liked the extra time and the makeup or resubmission options. They liked the variety of assignments and the materials posted in advance. But some students reported that they didn't like the unprofessional audio recordings that the faculty made and random pictures of animals in course materials where a visually impaired student found distracting. So who knows what they had done with those pictures of animals. But they did say that the course itself gave them they used the word nudge that they needed to implement accessible course design. And of course, the barriers like knowledge of time really limited the implementation. Some faculty said that they had concerns about academic integrity or attendance when materials were given in advance, that they thought students just wouldn't come to class if they had the materials in advance, or they might cheat more if they had the materials and they could distribute them around, although I guess everyone would have gotten them, right? And then certainly faculty. So there were two other like discipline specific or rank specific concerns. One was that programs like mine, where there are a lot of current events that we need to be covering, require accessible materials to be created more frequently than more like sort of traditional curriculum that might have the same thing kind of every year, curriculum wise, not like delivery wise. And that the faculty status, in other words, whether they were a lecturer or an assistant professor, limited innovations because they perceived them to be a little bit riskier for people with fewer job protections, right? We don't want to try something and then have it blow up in our face and then actually have that show up in our student evaluations, which are used for promotion and tenure.
And retention.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that's okay.
So some of the things that I recommend in the paper that should be done that are like transferable to other institutions, certainly giving faculty a training that's similar can help them with that nudge and the attitudes that I mentioned in the literature review, but also faculty in any future course should have instructions about how to do it, but then also practice with modifying documents. They need to be like a hands-on kind of practical sort of thing in order for people to not just have it fall out of their head and not implement it. But also faculty reported, for example, we have faculty in my program who teach evenings and weekends, and some other programs have that as well. And when they tried to get help from some tech support people, they were not able to do that. And so they were like, okay, so you want me to teach at night or on the weekend, but then Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, be at my desk where I can talk to the tech people, right? So when am I not working, right? And so there were concerns about that. And then there were concerns about, or there were suggestions about faculty receiving incentives to participate or just sort of ongoing support, especially from like upper administration that for example, I tried to go in my department and say that one of the things I was going to use for promotion and tenure one year when I was going up for full professor was I was going to demonstrate how accessible my materials were. And I thought that should be like a plus, like I was going to demonstrate 100% accessibility on all my materials. And I was specifically told, you don't want to narrow yourself. You don't want to promise something that might be too difficult. So just say that you're going to be a good teacher, and then the people can decide what that consists of, right? So in other words, I was discouraged from using accessibility as one of the things that I could put in my packet for promotion and tenure. One thing I do want to share that we did here at the university, and I hope we can invite these people on a future podcast. Our CSTEM is the college, but some of our STEM faculty did survey and interview students with disabilities about accessibility efforts. You're probably aware of this. And so they learned that these students, what their concerns were about accessibility. For example, the letter that faculty receive that says everything is the student's responsibility, and it's like this really kind of judgy letter. So I'd like to hear more about what they learned, but basically they directly got feedback, and one of my recommendations for other institutions would be to do something similar, which would be to ask students with disabilities, because as I mentioned, one of the limitations of this study is that I didn't ask students like how it went for them once this happened, right? And so
they're great follow-up.
Yeah, so they're the ones that would know this. They're the ones, and we can also include students who do not have disabilities, but who were in a class where some different innovations were taking place. Like, what was that like for you? And I know most people nowadays use closed captioning when they're watching movies and so forth. I mean, that's just become kind of like what people do now. But at least a few students reported to some faculty that they found it distracting to have these captions on. And then for me, my social justice heart is saying, sorry, the majority of people who were distracted by something, now a minority of people can benefit from this. So like, I kind of don't care that much, but you do want to keep students happy. And so maybe that just required a little more contextualization, right? Like, I understand that you found that distracting. I might suggest you look for an online version that does not have captions, or whatever your deal is. Like, write that in your journal over the, yeah, exactly. Like, put your hand up like you're watching a horror movie or whatever, so you don't have to see.
All the captions. Yeah. Did anybody, I don't know if you asked, did anybody talk about how they thought the course and the delivery and all that benefited?
They liked that the students were happy about the extended times, if you want to call it extended. To me, I think we're going back down that rabbit hole of extra when we add the word extended in there, but like different due dates, longer time. Again, I don't want to say longer time on tests. I want to say the same amount of time for everyone. Yeah, on tests. Those were recognizing that we didn't need to make that test anxiety part of the test, right? And so they said that they kind of liked it when students were saying, wow, you're going to let me revise this or whatever. And so most students reported that they either didn't notice, or they liked some of these, especially the universal design stuff. I think the students who don't need captions, but they did mention that second language, English as a second language or third language, whatever, folks liked the captions, and that they would have never thought about that if they hadn't gone and done this training. So of course, now we're collectively liberating like all the people when we work to support some.
Yeah.
And the last part of this, I'll always put this as the last paragraph of anything I submit on this topic, which is the concept of retrofitting that was introduced in the book Academic Ableism or other sources. But this idea that when we modified buildings back when the ADA was first implemented, or even up until now, we could put some ramps, and the ramps were often placed on the backside of buildings, and signs were put to say, okay, go around this corner and down this path in order to get in the building. And so these modifications, of course, allowed more people to access the buildings, but the message was clear: accommodating disabled people is an afterthought and something we're doing to meet legal requirements. That's how it came off to plenty of people, and still does. And so my recommendation, if we're going to create a disability website, for example, because this is about digital accessibility, which will not be regularly updated, that may be worse than having no website at all, because you're saying like, oh, we checked a box for you people, and now it's just not good work. And then one famous example at UC Berkeley, where they just didn't feel like doing it. I mean, I'm not speaking for all of UC Berkeley, but I can tell you that they removed a bunch of materials from their online offerings because they weren't accessible. And so they just said, well, we just won't have those materials. And they were sued for it. And it was this whole big thing, right? So my kind of takeaway message is, let's make sure that whatever efforts we do come across to disabled students as inclusive and sort of not this weird like asterisk, follow this page down to the corner if you want the accessible version, kind of like this ramp that's in some random part of a building. So I think this work can be transferable to other institutions, even of different sizes and different structures. Mm-hmm. And right now with Title II, it's obviously like way more important. But even after this Title II thing happens, we're going to hire some people in 2 years, and their training, their mandatory training, should be about accessibility as far as I'm concerned, even if Title II is not monitored or nobody checks. It should still be part of it.
It should. And I can't remember if I mentioned this in our last episode or not, but if so, here goes again. No, I reminded, within the last 6 years, I took, and then another adjunct faculty member in disability studies participated in this online, did virtual training about Canvas. I don't remember all the other details, but there was this 1 2-minute section of the video training that said, click on the three dots on the top right, then click here to turn on this feature. And then later the little post test said, which of these 3 buttons do you click on for this feature?
Okay. And
I emailed, and then within 6 months, this other person emailed the IT people and said, we don't know. There's zero visual description in the video, and so it's impossible to tell without visually comprehending that this is the button you're supposed to click on. And we can't move forward with the training. Come on, we're trying to get done with it. And in both cases, the IT people, they didn't make the training. To be fair, I'm sure they bought it. But instead of doing anything about it, because they couldn't, or it would be extra work,
right,
they just said, we're going to go in and delete that question for you.
But everyone else had to use the question?
Yeah.
Wow. And retrofitting.
It's 100% a retrofit, and it's an access fail. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't change that an unedited version of this video with no audio description exists and is presumably routinely used around the country.
Yeah, so we're getting to the end of our episode here, but I wonder, just based on that last idea, is it unfair to continue to distribute materials that are only accessible by, or shouldn't even use accessible, that can only be interpreted and accessed by people who do not have whatever, visual impairment or whatever, and have a concurrent sort of side version of it for those people, like your quiz was? I mean, should we, when we see something that's inaccessible, do whatever we can to take it down, or make a new version of it that is now distributed that has more accessibility?
I know when I encounter something, when students point out this isn't accessible, I make a note of it, and then I make a point of addressing it in a timely manner with a revised version of a thing. So I think we should do that.
Yeah, and even if you added something onto that audio thing that you're describing, that would be better than holding the students with disabilities to a different standard, which was what happened when you deleted that quiz question, when they deleted that quiz question, right? So we could do that. I could say, oh, well, only 40% of my materials are accessible. So the students who can't access them have to take 40% less of the test on this topic. And then now what am I doing? Do I just, feel bad for people with disabilities and hold them to different standards? And I'm just glad they made it here and they got through the program, even though they did 40% less of the stuff.
Well, and then that's why I imagine that's why having a lot of the conversations around this shifted to using like learners instead of students. Because like a learner is anybody who's trying to learn something, right? And I'm not a student when I'm doing my professional training, but I'm a learner, and I still have never learned what's the proper buttons.
Yeah, you currently don't know what it means. Yeah,
and taking it off the test does not help me learn that.
Correct.
What can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So, what would you, if you had all the money in the world, or at least the same amount of money, what would you do next with this?
I think talking to students is helpful. I think asking what we even think education is supposed to consist of would be helpful. Again, I don't want to force us in, I don't want to pigeonhole us into, being an educator is only these 10 things. But at the same time, it does at least include those 10 things. And one of those is making materials at least universally designed or accessible, right? So thinking about the learner when you're planning the thing and not just the learning objectives is important. And I wasn't taught that, right? It was just sort of like, okay, if you want students to be able in the end to demonstrate that they know the 3 key theories in social work practice and how those might apply at the micro, meso, macro level, then as long as I can do that, I never thought about the who that was in there, right?
Yeah.
And so,
okay.
And so I would certainly say, whether people like it or not, whether it's a Title II year or not, faculty who begin teaching at an institution should be required to participate in accessibility training. And ever since I've been in this role, we have, for example, our new faculty orientation this last year and maybe the year before, I'm part of those, part of that training, whereas before I was just in the training when I first got hired. And we have included accessibility material in that, but somebody could not go to the new faculty orientation and they don't get fired. Right. So like, what can we have some teeth with this too, or even some incentives? But even with incentives, and I've asked people about this, there's some good. It may be that for example, our school provided $250 to people to attend an accessibility training during COVID, and because we all had to go online, and some people just didn't do the accessibility training and didn't take the $250 because they said $250 isn't the right amount for them to want to take that. Right.
That's a lot of money for this to do.
Yeah, I thought so too. So anyway, it turns out incentives don't work, but even what you might call like,
for my office. I don't care. I'll show you.
Even what you might call like punishments. So the carrot or the stick, right? If we can't see through that punishment, then it doesn't matter, right? And so I'm not trying to say every faculty who doesn't learn about accessibility gets punished or whatever. I'm just saying it was not part of my training and my onboarding, and therefore I didn't think about it until I thought about it. And now people are thinking about it for the first time because of Title II. And so what I would like to do is perhaps get more literature out there like this that says, hey, this is improving faculty attitudes. But I think what the administrators want to know is it improving student enrollment and student graduation rates? And so we need to make that link, which means we would have to talk to students, find out, did this do something for you, and have comparison groups, right? There are some students that didn't get a teacher who had accessibility training and some students who did, and what were the outcomes there, right? Right now, I mean, over the next year or two, we are going to see how Title II and the expectations for that changed anything, how people teach, how students participated in school, learn or whatever, right? But I think those are, so basically I'm saying more concrete outcomes, which can come from qualitative or quantitative sources, but they would need to include what students experience, think, and can do by the time they graduate.
Yeah, well, you know what the need.